12-year-old Jalen Brooks stood on the sidewalk outside his new house in Maple Ridge, Georgia, adjusting the straps of his backpack while his mom, Danielle, knelt to double-check his sneakers. She didn't say much, just looked at him with the kind of worry only a mother of a black son understands. "You're smart, Jalen. You're worthy. And you belong," she said softly. Jalen nodded. He'd heard those words before, but today they felt like armor. It was his third school in 2 years. Maple Ridge Middle looked nice enough. Fresh paint, manicured lawn, banners about kindness, but as he stepped onto the school bus, the chatter died down. Dozens of unfamiliar faces turned, stared, then turned back like he didn't matter. No one offered a seat. He found a spot near the back and clutched his backpack like a shield. His homeroom teacher, Ms. Carmichael, looked up as he entered room 302. She was in her early 60s, glasses perched on her nose, lips thin and tight. "Class, this is our new student, Jalen." Jalen, he corrected softly. "Right? From where again?" "Charlotte," he replied. "Well, find a seat," she said, already turning back to her attendance sheet. She called out to Cody, a blond kid by the window. "Move over." Cody rolled his eyes, sighed like it was a chore, and shoved his backpack aside. From that moment on, Jalen felt it. The coldness, the disinterest. Ms. Carmichael never called on him. When he answered questions during group work, she barely nodded. But when Cody spoke, right or wrong, she smiled and encouraged him like he was her favorite grandson. Lunchtime wasn't better. Every time Jalen walked toward a table, the kids shifted away or claimed seats were taken. He ended up alone in the back corner every day, picking at his sandwich, pretending not to hear the whispers and stifled laughs. He never told his mom. When she asked, he always said school was fine. But at night those words she always told him, "You are enough," echoed in his heart. The shift came when Miss Carmichael announced Career Hero Day. "Next Friday," she said, "you'll give a short presentation about someone in your family, a parent or grandparent, who inspires you." Voices lit up. "My dad's a fireman." "My aunt flies helicopters." For the first time, Jalen sat up straighter. He knew exactly who he was going to talk about. That night, he pulled out a shoebox from under his bed. Inside, birthday cards, a worn-out letter, and a single photo. In it, a younger Dominic Grant, known to the world as a blockbuster action star, held a newborn in his arms, smiling with pride. That baby was Jalen. Danielle had told him the truth years ago. Dominic, before the fame and flashing cameras, had been part of her life. He had been there. Calls, visits, quiet moments. Then Hollywood swept him away. There were no headlines, no public claims. But Jalen remembered his voice, deep and kind, telling him, "You're stronger than they think." All week, Jalen wrote and rewrote his speech, practicing in the mirror. "My father's name is Dominic Grant, but most people know him as an actor. He's my hero because even when he got famous, he told me to never be ashamed of who I am." Danielle never discouraged him, but her eyes were cautious. "Tell your truth," she said, "but be ready if they don't believe it." The day before presentations, during recess, Cody and a couple of his buddies cornered Jalen. "So, who you gonna say your dad is tomorrow?" Cody asked, loud enough for others to hear. "LeBron." "The president," Jalen replied calmly. "Dominic Grant." For a beat, silence, then laughter. "You're joking, right, that guy?" Cody laughed. "He's white, dude. You're the total opposite." Another kid chimed in. "Maybe your mom wishes he was your dad." Jalen walked away, heart pounding, not from anger but from shame. He looked again at the photo. Same smile, same father. But suddenly, it felt fragile, like the world had no space for it. He had no idea what would happen next. Friday morning arrived gray and still. Jalen wore his cleanest button-up. Triple-checked that the photo was tucked safely in his folder. He walked into homeroom with a calm face, but a storm inside. Presentations began. Kids talked about moms who were nurses, dads who built houses, uncles who ran businesses. Then came Jalen's turn. He walked to the front, hands steady, heart loud. "My name is Jalen Brooks, and my hero is my dad, Dominic Grant. You might know him from movies, but I know him as Dad." Laughter exploded. Cody slapped the desk, laughing so hard he choked. "You've got to be kidding me." Ms. Carmichael raised her hand to quiet the room, then looked at Jalen. Her expression didn't soften. "Jalen," she said with a sigh, "this is about real people in your life, not celebrities you see on TV. But he is my—" "That's enough," she cut in. "Sit down." The room fell silent. Jalen returned to his seat, photo trembling in his hand, name reduced to a joke. The one adult who should have believed him had humiliated him instead. That night, he gave the photo and speech to his mom without saying a word. Danielle stared at the picture, then quietly picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "Dominic, it's Danielle," she said. "He's not okay." "I'll be there," the voice replied, "tomorrow." The next morning, as Jalen sat in homeroom, the door creaked open. Gasps echoed. Dominic Grant, hoodie pulled up, stepped inside. He walked to the front, eyes scanning until they found Jalen. "I heard my son was called a liar," he said calmly, "because his truth didn't look like yours." He turned to Miss Carmichael. "You didn't believe him, not because of what he said, but because of what he looks like." The class sat in stunned silence. "This young man is my son," Dominic continued, "not because of skin tone, not because of fame, because he's mine." And he told the truth. Jalen stood up, walked to the front, looked out at the class. "I didn't say he was my dad for attention," he said. "I said it because it's the truth, and I shouldn't have to look like someone to be believed." No one laughed. That Monday, Miss Carmichael stood in front of the entire school and apologized, publicly. "I let my own bias decide what was believable," she said, "and I was wrong." Jalen didn't become popular, but he became seen, and sometimes that's more powerful than anything. Because telling your truth isn't about being loud, it's about standing tall and waiting for the world to catch up. The halls of Maple Ridge Middle weren't loud, they just weren't welcoming. As Jalen Brooks walked from one class to another, he noticed it. The way lockers clanged shut when he passed. The way conversations paused mid-sentence only to resume once he'd moved on. It wasn't open cruelty, it was colder than that. Polite exclusion. His teachers called roll every morning, but his name was always an afterthought. "Jackson, Riley, Jalen?" "Jalen," he'd whisper. They rarely got it right, they rarely cared to. By Wednesday, he'd stopped raising his hand. What was the point? When he did, Miss Carmichael either looked past him or acted like she hadn't seen it. And when he got called on during group work and answered correctly, her praise was as flat as dry toast. But Cody, the golden boy in the front row, he could mumble a half-right answer and get chuckles, head pats, and good effort smiles. In gym class, nobody picked Jalen for teams, not first, not last. He was simply left unchosen until the teacher finally forced someone to take him. He ate lunch alone, every day. It became routine. Walk to the furthest corner table. Keep your head down. Pretend you don't hear your name being said 2 tables away, followed by laughs. At home, his mom, Danielle, kept asking how his day went. "Fine," he'd say, peeling open a granola bar. You make any friends? He'd shrug. People are chill. She knew he was lying, but she didn't push. She just hugged him longer when they said goodnight. By the end of the first week, Jalen had become a background character in his own story. The school had swallowed him up and spat out silence. His notebooks were full, but his heart was heavy. He kept a journal. Not the dear diary kind, just one he wrote in at night when the world was asleep. He wrote about how it felt to be looked through, about how even though he existed in every room, it felt like he wasn't allowed to take up space. They don't see me, not really. They see a guess, a label. They already decided who I am before I opened my mouth. Friday came, and during science class, the teacher paired them up for a lab on circuits. Jalen ended up with Ellie, a girl with tight curls, sharp eyes, and a too-cool-to-care vibe. She didn't talk much, but she didn't push him away either. They worked in silence until she looked up and said, "You're good at this stuff." Jalen blinked. "Thanks." Ellie shrugged. "People here can be weird. Don't take it personal." That sentence, "don't take it personal," stuck with him the rest of the day. But it was hard not to. When you're 12 and black in a mostly white school, personal isn't optional. It's stitched into every sideways glance, every unspoken judgment. That weekend, he didn't talk much. He watched a few of his dad's old movies alone in the living room. Not because he was a fanboy, but because they were proof. Proof that he mattered. That his story was real, even if nobody at school believed it. He pulled out the photo again, the one with Dominic Grant holding him as a baby. His mom had once said, "This is the photo that makes me feel strong and scared at the same time." Now, Jalen knew what she meant. Monday morning came fast. Miss Carmichael made her usual announcements, monotone, efficient. Then she smiled, the warmest one Jalen had ever seen on her face, and said, "Next Friday is Career Hero Day. Each of you will present someone in your family who inspires you, ideally a parent or grandparent. Start preparing." The class lit up with excited chatter. And Jalen, for the first time in 2 weeks, he felt something shift inside, because he already knew exactly who he was going to talk about. And even if nobody else believed him, he would speak his truth anyway. That night, Jalen sat cross-legged on the floor of his bedroom, an open notebook resting on his knees, pencil tapping against his lip. His shoebox sat beside him, weathered, familiar, filled with pieces of a story no one else seemed ready to hear. He pulled out the photo again. Dominic Grant, young and broad-shouldered, cradled a newborn in a gray hoodie blanket. No red carpet, no paparazzi, just warmth in his smile, and a hand on the baby's back like he was holding his whole world. Jalen stared at the image, then began to write. "My dad's name is Dominic Grant, but you might know him from the movies. I know him as someone who told me to be proud of who I am, to walk into rooms like I belong there, to speak even when my voice shakes." His mom peeked into his room a few minutes later, wearing her hospital scrubs, hair pulled into a messy bun. She leaned on the doorframe. "You working on your hero speech?" she asked. Jalen nodded. Danielle stepped in and sat on the edge of his bed, quiet for a moment. "Are you sure?" she asked gently. "About using your dad?" Jalen didn't look up. "He's my truth, right?" Danielle exhaled, smiled faintly. "Then tell it. But be ready. Some people hear truth, and instead of listening, they laugh." He looked up at her. "You think they won't believe me?" "I think some people have small imaginations," she said, "especially when the truth doesn't look like what they're used to." Jalen said nothing. He just turned the photo toward her. Danielle ran a thumb across the plastic sleeve. "If you're going to tell them who you are," she said softly, "then tell them all the way, head high, shoulders back." By Thursday, the air in class buzzed with anticipation. Cody bragged loudly during recess about his dad, a high school football coach. "Wait until y'all hear about mine. He's like a local legend." When Jalen stayed behind to go over his notes, Cody sauntered up with two of his buddies. "So," he said, leaning on the lunch table, "who you saying your hero is tomorrow?" Jalen looked up from his notebook. "My dad." "Oh yeah? And who's he again?" "Dominic Grant," Jalen answered calmly. The silence was instant. Then came the eruption of laughter. "Wait, Dominic Grant? The Dominic Grant?" Cody slapped the table. "Man, you're killing me. That dude's like mega famous, ain't no way." One of his friends snorted. "Bro, you don't even look like him." Cody added, "You know what's funny? If you'd said your dad worked in a garage or something, might have believed it." Jalen's stomach twisted, but his face stayed steady. "Cool," he said, picking up his folder. "You'll find out tomorrow." That night, Jalen barely slept. He recited his speech in the mirror until the words were burned into his brain. He checked his backpack 5 times to make sure the photo was safe. But something in his chest wouldn't settle, a low hum of dread that the truth, even with evidence, wouldn't be enough. The next morning, his mom kissed his forehead at the door. "Say what's real," she whispered, "no matter who's listening." By the time presentations began, the classroom felt tighter than usual. Miss Carmichael called students up one by one. Ellie shared about her grandmother who was a civil rights activist. A boy named Marcus talked about his mom, an ER nurse. Then came Cody's turn. Loud, cocky, he went on about Friday night lights and winning championships. Miss Carmichael beamed like he was her own kid, and then, "Jalen, you're up." The room shifted. Cody leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, already smirking. Jalen stood, walked slowly to the front, hands a little shaky, but his voice was steady. "My name is Jalen Brooks," he began, "and my hero is my father, Dominic Grant." He reached into his folder and placed the photo on Miss Carmichael's desk. Whispers swept the room like a breeze before a storm. Cody let out a loud snort. "Oh, come on. This dude thinks his dad is a movie star?" Miss Carmichael held up a hand to quiet the class, but her eyes narrowed at Jalen. "Jalen," she said, her voice crisp, "this project is about real people, people from your life, not celebrities you admire." Jalen blinked. "He is from my life. He's my dad." "Okay," she said with a sigh. "Let's not turn this into a fantasy exercise. Please, sit down." The laughter stopped, but only because the silence was heavier. Jalen's hands trembled as he picked up his photo and returned to his seat. No one met his eyes, not even the ones who laughed. He didn't remember the rest of the class, just the pressure in his chest and the way his truth had been sliced apart, not by students but by the very adult who should have protected it. That afternoon, he walked home without saying a word. Danielle was in the kitchen chopping onions when he came in. One look at his face and she stopped. He handed her the crumpled speech and the photo, then walked to his room. That night, Danielle sat at the table in silence. Then she opened her phone, scrolled, hesitated. Finally, she tapped a number she hadn't called in years. It rang once, twice. Then, "Hello?" Her voice cracked, but her words were clear. "Dom, he needs you." Friday night came and went in silence. Jalen barely touched his dinner. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe he should have just said his dad worked at a post office. Something simple, something safe. But deep down, beneath the hurt and the shame, he knew he had done the right thing. The truth wasn't meant to be easy. It was meant to be told. What he didn't know was that far across town, someone else had spent the night staring at a screen. Dominic Grant, scrolling through photos, old texts, long-ignored memories, before booking a last-minute flight. Monday morning, 9:17 a.m. The halls of Maple Ridge Middle buzzed like any other day. Miss Carmichael stood at the front of the room 302, scribbling math equations on the whiteboard, her voice droning on about decimals. Jalen sat in the second row, eyes unfocused, mind drifting somewhere between exhaustion and disappointment. Then, knock, knock. A light, firm knock at the classroom door. Miss Carmichael paused mid-sentence. "Hold on, class," she said, walking to the door. When it opened, the room froze. He stepped in, hoodie, jeans, boots still dusted from the sidewalk. Tall, calm, familiar, Dominic Grant. The class went silent. Mouths dropped. Whispers rippled across the desks. "Wait, is that—" "No way." Miss Carmichael blinked. "Mr. Grant, I wasn't expecting—" "No," Dominic said, his voice smooth but firm. "I imagine you weren't, because you didn't believe him." He stepped further into the room, eyes sweeping across the stunned faces until they landed on Jalen, sitting frozen, wide-eyed. "I came here," he continued, "because my son told you something true. And you called him a liar." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Dominic turned toward the class. "You all laughed because you thought someone like him," he gestured to Jalen, "couldn't possibly be the son of someone like me." He looked back at Miss Carmichael. Not because of what he said, but because of what he looks like. Miss Carmichael opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I've been silent for years," Dominic said. "I thought I was protecting him. But maybe I was just protecting myself from a world that wouldn't understand, that didn't want to." He walked toward Jalen slowly, then stopped beside his desk. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "You told your story, even when they tried to erase it. That takes guts most adults don't even have." Jalen stood up, shaky at first, but his shoulders squared. "I didn't want people to think I was lying," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "I just wanted them to see me." Dominic turned back to the class. "Families don't all look the same. Truth doesn't come with a skin tone. And love, real love, doesn't care if it fits your expectations." The room was still. No one dared to smirk now. Not Cody, not Miss Carmichael. Only the slow shifting weight of recognition hung in the air. Then Jalen took one step forward and faced the class himself. "I'm not just the son of someone famous," he said. "I'm someone who deserves to be heard. I shouldn't have to prove that." Miss Carmichael's voice finally broke through the quiet. I was wrong," she said. "Jalen, He held up a hand, not with anger, but with strength. "I don't want your pity," he said. "I just want your respect." Later that day, the principal called an emergency meeting with Danielle, Ms. Carmichael, and the school counselor. Dominic attended via speakerphone. Danielle sat straight-backed, eyes steady. "My son was humiliated," she said. "Not by accident. By assumption." Ms. Carmichael's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I let my bias speak louder than the student in front of me." Danielle didn't nod. She didn't smile. "You owe him more than an apology," she said. "You owe him recognition." It was decided. Miss Carmichael would apologize at the Monday assembly, in front of everyone. That weekend, Jalen didn't hide in his room. He and Dominic played basketball in the park, shared burgers at a small diner, and talked like father and son, openly, finally. And when Jalen asked, "Why didn't you ever go public?" Dominic answered honestly, "I thought I was protecting you from the noise. But maybe I was wrong." Jalen nodded. "I didn't need noise. I just needed someone to believe me. Monday morning, school assembly. The gymnasium buzzed with restless chatter as rows of students filed into their seats. Teachers whispered in small groups. Even the principal, Mr. Hawthorne, usually stiff as a statue, looked uncomfortable at the podium. And then, Miss Carmichael stepped forward. She stood behind the microphone, hands clasped tightly. Her usual calm, polished tone was replaced by something raw, human. "Last week," she began, voice slightly shaking, "I made a mistake, a serious one." The room quieted. I doubted a student, not because of his words, but because of my own assumptions, because of what I thought was believable. I let my bias, unconscious or not, speak louder than the truth he shared. She turned toward the front row, where Jalen sat beside his mother, who held her son's hand with quiet pride. "Jalen," she said, eyes meeting his, "I am deeply sorry. You told your truth with courage, and I failed to listen. I hope you, and all of you, can learn from my failure." The silence hung for a moment. Then, applause. Not thunderous, not performative, but honest. It began with a few claps, then grew louder, fuller, real. For the first time since walking through the school's front doors, Jalen didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. In the days that followed, something changed at Maple Ridge. Not all at once, but gradually, like snow melting in spring. Cody didn't offer a full apology, but he stopped sneering in the hallway. Some kids who had laughed now nodded when they passed Jalen. Others asked about his favorite movies, or quietly said, "That was brave, man." Even Ms. Carmichael was different. She invited Jalen to help create a new classroom project called My Story, My Voice. A safe space for students to share real stories about their families, however messy or unexpected they were. He agreed, not because he wanted attention, but because he finally understood. Change doesn't start with shouting. It starts with someone daring to speak up. A month later, the school hosted Community Night. Families gathered in the cafeteria with potluck trays and stories to share. Laughter echoed, hugs exchanged. And Jalen? He stood next to his mom near the drinks table when Dominic Grant walked in. No red carpet, no press. Just a father in a hoodie and jeans. Parents whispered, kids stared. Jalen didn't flinch. He walked over, smiled, and said, "Everyone, this is my dad." Dominic shook hands, took pictures, talked to teachers, but most of all he stood behind his son, quietly, like a wall that couldn't be knocked down. He didn't stay long, just enough. Before he left, he placed a hand on Jalen's shoulder and leaned in. "You did something I couldn't, kid," he said. "You told the truth even when no one was ready for it." Jalen nodded. "They are now." That night, lying in bed, Jalen stared at the ceiling. He thought of the laughter, the doubt, the way truth had to claw its way through prejudice. But then he thought of the knock at the door, the silence that followed, the way the room shifted when someone finally believed him. He whispered into the dark, "I'm not just his son. I'm my own person, and that's enough." And for the first time since moving to Maple Ridge, he believed it. Life lesson. Speak your truth, even when it's uncomfortable. There will be moments in life when telling the truth feels like the hardest thing you can do, especially when the world around you has already made up its mind about who you are. But your story matters, even if it doesn't fit other people's expectations. Jalen's experience reminds us that truth doesn't need permission to exist. It doesn't have to match someone's idea of what's believable. Whether it's your background, your family, your dreams, or your identity, you have the right to be heard and respected. Sometimes standing up for your truth won't earn applause. It might bring silence, doubt, or even ridicule. But staying silent just to make others comfortable will never bring you peace. The people who truly matter will stand beside you, not because you shouted, but because you dared to speak. And maybe the most powerful kind of courage isn't being loud, it's being real.